On today's episode of The Plant Doctor, what I want to go over with you guys is how we propagate Japanese maples. I did a video about a year ago showing how we do this. I got a comment on that video from a very well-known propagator of Japanese maples that said, try this one other thing and your success will probably be greater. So I want to share that with you guys today. The reason that we do not propagate Japanese maples from seed is because they're not true to seed. So if I were to take the seed off of this Garnet Japanese Maple here and grow those out, I'm going to get a different variety of trees. Some will be green, some will be red, some might even be darker red than this, some might be lime green, some might be dark green. I may get different textures of leaves. I may get a broadleaf Japanese maple. I may get a very fine textured Japanese leaf maple here as well, just like this tree here. So what we do is propagate these from Scion wood. So what we do is we take a cutting off of this, and then we're going to graft it onto what we call rootstock, and that's what I'm going to walk you guys through on this week's edition of The Plant Doctor. What a beautiful specimen of a dissectum Japanese maple. This particular cultivar is Garnet, and it's here in the full shade, and it's more green in the shade than it would be in the sun. If this plant is in full sun, it is a very dark red, like a crimson red color. Just a beautiful, beautiful tree. And notice the fine textured foliage on this. So this is one that's highly valuable. If you go to a local retail garden center or like Lowe's or Home Depot, in a 1 gallon pot, you're probably paying $40 or $50 for one of these in a 1 gallon. So if you can learn how to propagate these things, you can save some money or start a little backyard nursery and start to make some money off of these as well. So let's take a look at how to do this. So the first thing we need to do is collect Scion wood. So Scion wood is just a term for the stem that we're going to graft to rootstock. So what you need is pretty simple. You need a very sharp pair of hand pruners, and this is very important. You want to sterilize your hand pruners as well, and it's probably a good idea to sterilize your hands. You could either wash your hands or rub a little bit of rubbing alcohol on them. And what I'm going to do, I'm just going to take a paper towel. I'm going to put a little bit of rubbing alcohol on there. I'm going to take my pruners and I'm just going to wipe them down real good. So what we're doing here is preventing pathogen transfer from the pruners to the Japanese maple here. And for a good Scion, what I like to do is find some what we call semi-hardwood. So today is June the 14th. These are summer grafts. I'm going to count back 3 nodes. So this wood that we're using, this is new growth that's starting to harden off. So this is the growth that came out in March and April when this plant started to leaf back out. And so now it's been leafing out for about 90 days, give or take, and some of that wood's starting to harden off a little bit, so hence the term semi-hardwood. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to count back 1, 2, 3 nodes. Just above that 4th node, I'm going to make a cut. So I'm left with this. So I've got 1 node, 2 nodes, 3 nodes here at the top. Now, I'm going to sterilize my pruners because I accidentally laid them down on the pine straw. So now I'm sterile here. The one thing I did in my previous video, I just pulled the petioles off to expose the bud. But I got a comment, like I said earlier, from a guy that's really good at grafting, and he said, leave the petioles on, but just cut off the leaf blades like this. And so I did this last summer. So I did two groups. I did a group where I pulled the petiole off, and I did a group where I left the petiole on and just cut the leaf blades off. There's my Scion. The group that I left the petiole on with had about a 20% higher take rate as opposed to the ones where I took the petioles off. So it does seem to give you a greater success rate by leaving these petioles on. And then what I'm going to do with this, I'm simply going to put it in this bucket here. This is a bucket of cold water. I'm just going to put it in there because it is hot today. It's about 90 degrees, just to keep these cool and moist until I can graft them to some rootstock, because I'm going to take several dozen Scions off of this tree today. All right, so we've moved around to the back patio so I could have a place to sit down and show you how to do this. First thing is sterile, sterile, and more sterile. So you really have to think of this as if we're performing surgery on a plant. We are, right? We're taking part of one plant and putting it onto another plant. So just like as if we were doing surgery on a human, we need to be sterile there. We need to be sterile when we do this. And you can actually see where I've tried to graft before on this tree. 2 separate times these 2 grafts failed. Since this is a garnet, one that weeps and the trunk really doesn't show, I'm going to go a little bit higher up on my rootstock here to insert this Scion. If this was something like a Sangukaku or coral bark Japanese maple, I would want to do it real low, because the bark or the trunk itself is one of the ornamental features. But since we're doing the garnets here, the dissectum, there's not a big need for that. So I've just put some alcohol on this paper towel, and I'm going to sterilize the trunk of our rootstock. And I've had grafting knives in the past, but what I've started doing, it works just as well, is I started using a box blade. They're very sharp. The blades are relatively cheap. When they start to go dull, you can flip it over and use the other side, and once that side's dull, you can just throw it out and get another one. But I've already sterilized this guy, so what I'm going to do is bend this over a little bit and make a small incision about 3/4 of an inch long. And I notice I didn't go very deep at all right there. So the next thing we want to do is I'm going to grab a Scion. I have my Scion just off camera here in the bucket that you saw earlier. And if I can grab just one, there we go. All right, so here's our Scion. And I'm going to take my paper towel that has the alcohol on it, and where I'm going to cut, I'm going to sterilize that as well. In our Scion, what I'm going to do is just make a small cut on one side. I'm going to turn it over 180 degrees, cut the other side a little bit longer so that it looks something like that. Okay. Now, this is the important part. I do not want to put the Scion directly in the middle of my cut. If you look inside the cut on your rootstock, you're going to see some green on the outer edges either side of that cut, and you can see the green on our Scion there. You want to match the green of the Scion with the green of the rootstock. So that's the cambium layer, that's the vascular tissue. You can think of that as like the blood vessels and arteries that are in your body. So that's what's bringing nutrients up and down the plant. We want to try to place those together. And the long side, what I like to do is, notice this side's, the cut's a little shorter, this side's a little longer. That longer side, what I do is I put it towards the rootstock stem, okay? And so what we're looking for here is to get good contact. If you look through there and you see a gap, that's not good. You want to make sure that the Scion and your rootstock stem or trunk are in contact with each other, no air gaps. And I may have to trim this one down just a smidge more. I have a little bump out here that's keeping it from wanting to touch. That's much better right there. Now the next thing we do, this is a product called Buddy Tape, B-U-D-D-Y, Buddy Tape. You can pick this up on Amazon, that's where I got this. But this is a tape specifically designed for doing this, for grafting trees. Notice it's flexible, I pull it out. I'm going to start just below the base of my cut. So about half the width of my tape is going to be below the cut and half above. And as I rotate up, I want half, the bottom half of my tape here to touch the top row of that row I just made, if that makes any sense. So I'm going up in half row increments. Just like that. And this last little bit, what I like to do is bring it back through in between the rootstock and the Scion, just like that. That's going to help prevent water from getting down in between the two and rotting out where we have put our Scion. The next thing I do, I take a little baggie and I write the name of the cultivar on it. So you can see here I had a, on the other side of the bag, I just marked it out. That was one that didn't take. So these are Garnet. That way I know what cultivar these are. And you can use copper sulfate or daconil. I've got daconil here. I just mixed it up in a spray bottle. 1 squirt of daconil. And then I'm going to place this over my Scion. And I'm just going to seal it up. And that's it. Okay, so we have just grafted a Japanese maple. So let's talk about where to put this guy. You may have seen my video of my backyard nursery, and I have a little shade cloth back there. I'm going to pull the shade cloth up, and I'm going to keep these under shade, as much shade as I can get them in, because you don't want the sun to burn out your Scion before it takes onto the rootstock. If you have a patio area that is shaded, stick it in behind a piece of patio furniture so it's in full shade. It would take there as well. If you're just doing 1 or 2 or 3 of these, that would work. If you're doing several dozen to hundreds, some people do hundreds, you may want to invest in a shade cloth. And the darker the shade cloth, probably the better. Guys, if you have any questions or comments, please leave them down below. And as always, if you're enjoying the educational content of the channel, please hit that subscribe button, hit that like button. It's helping us out a lot. We're almost monetized thanks to you guys. Last I checked, we're right at about 700 subs. And to think that I started this to share a few videos with my students, and those videos were private, and then I did a few public videos and people started subscribing. I never thought this would happen. So thank you guys, I really appreciate it. Until next time, this is the Plant Doctor.